Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling something really heavy. We're going deep into a report from the U.S. Secret Service National Threat Assessment Center, or NTC. It's their 2019 analysis titled Mass Attacks in Public Spaces.
And it's a stark look, really. Not just numbers, but a close examination of 34 specific targeted attacks.
Right, attacks where 3 or more people were harmed. Our goal here is to pull out the key findings, look for those common threads, anything that might help understand prevention.
Exactly. We want to give you a clear, concise overview, drawing straight from that NTFIC report. It's about understanding potential pathways to violence, not to, point fingers, but to see where interventions might have been possible or could be possible.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. The scope of these attacks in 2019, 34 incidents.
34, yeah, across 21 states. That's more than 2 a month on average.
And the locations, they were all over the place, right? Not just one type of setting.
That's a key point. It was a disturbing mix. Public spots like, sidewalks, restaurants, shops, gas stations, places you go every day. But also semi-public places, workplaces, schools, houses of worship, even military bases, apartment complexes, a commercial bus.
Wow. Any patterns in the locations?
Well, the most frequent were businesses or service-type locations. That was 15 of the incidents. And then open spaces like parks or streets accounted for 11.
Okay, so really hitting places central to daily life.
It really highlights the vulnerability, yeah.
And the weapons used, I imagine firearms feature heavily.
Tragically, yes. Firearms were the main weapon in 24 of the 34 attacks. That's a huge majority, about 71%.
71%, both handguns and long guns.
Both, yes. But it wasn't only firearms. We also saw bladed weapons used in 6 cases, vehicles in 4, and blunt objects in 3, and sometimes combinations.
And this is concerning. What about legal access to those firearms?
Well, that's a critical finding. In at least 10 of those firearm attacks, the attacker was actually legally prohibited from possessing a firearm.
10 cases. So people who shouldn't have had guns managed to get them anyway.
You raises serious questions about, how those firearms were acquired. It points to a gap, definitely.
It really does. What about timing? Any specific days or times that stood out?
Not really specific days. Attacks happened all days of the week, every month. But the time of day, about 65%, occurred between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m.
So primarily during daylight, more active hours.
Right. When more people are likely to be out and about. And the duration, that varied a lot too.
How so?
Nearly half were incredibly fast, over within 5 minutes, just terrifyingly quick.
5 minutes.
But then over a third lasted 15 minutes or longer. And there was one, a standoff at a kosher market that went on for 3 hours and 26 minutes.
Over 3 hours, the sustained terror. It's hard to imagine. Who were the targets? Was it personal or random?
Mostly random, it seems. About 76% of the attacks targeted people just present in that public space. But in about 24%, so nearly a quarter, the attackers did have specific targets in mind, often tied to some kind of grievance work, domestic issues, something personal.
But even then,
even when there was a specific target, in every single one of those cases in this report, bystanders were also harmed. It underscores how indiscriminate these attacks become, even if they start with a specific grudge.
right, the violence spills over. How did these incidents usually end?
The most common outcome actually was the attacker just leaving the scene. That happened in about 44% of cases.
They just left?
Yeah. Law enforcement intervention ended about 24% of them. And sadly, that included 5 instances where police killed the attacker.
Okay.
Sometimes the attack ended because the weapon stopped working, which happened in 15% of cases.
A grim sort of luck, I suppose.
And importantly, bystander intervention stopped the attack in 9% of cases.
Bystanders stepped in. That's incredibly brave.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then suicide was also a factor. 9% died by suicide at the scene and another 3% after leaving.
That bystander element is powerful, shows potential community response. Let's shift focus now to the attackers themselves. What does the report tell us about them?
Okay, demographics first. Overwhelmingly male, about 92%.
Right.
Age ranged widely, 16 all the way to 80. But the report specifically notes a higher number in the 15 to 24 age group compared to NTI's previous studies.
Interesting. Younger cohort featuring more prominently. What about race and ethnicity?
The report breaks it down. 51% were white non-Hispanic, 27% Black or African American, 14% Hispanic, 5% identified as 2 or more races, and 3% were undetermined.
Okay. And their life situations. Employment. Substance use.
Employment was pretty split. About 30% were employed, another 30% were unemployed. So no single profile there.
Right.
Those employed had various jobs, but notably, 7 attackers had either just lost their job or were about to. That suggests economic stress is a potential factor for some.
A possible trigger or stressor.
Yeah.
Substance use?
That was quite prevalent. Nearly half, 46%, had a history of using illicit drugs or misusing prescription medication.
Almost half.
Yeah, and 41% showed clear signs of abuse that was causing problems in their lives. The report also highlighted a strong link between substance abuse and domestic violence.
Strong.
27% of the attackers had histories of both. That connection seems really significant, suggesting that tackling substance abuse in domestic situations could be a vital intervention point.
That overlap is definitely something to note. Did they have run-ins with the law before? Criminal histories?
Yes, half of them, 51%, had a prior criminal history.
Right.
That's not counting minor traffic stuff.
Half.
Yeah. Arrests, charges for various offenses. Some had really extensive records, even from a young age, including violent offenses.
So a pattern of behavior for many.
And sometimes there was contact with police about concerning behavior that didn't lead to arrest, which makes you wonder about intervention thresholds. Were there missed signals?
A difficult question. What about violence that wasn't maybe officially charged, like domestic violence?
Well, related to the criminal history, nearly half, 46%, had a known history of violence towards others generally. And specifically domestic violence, 35% had committed prior acts.
35%. But you said not all were charged.
Right. Only some of those domestic violence incidents led to charges. But its prevalence here really highlights the need for effective intervention in domestic abuse. And it connects back to firearm laws too. People with domestic violence convictions, restraining orders, are often prohibited from owning guns.
Yet some still acquired them, as we discussed earlier.
Exactly. The report mentions one attacker with a history of stalking and assault who still got firearms.
Let's talk about mental health. It always comes up in these discussions. What did NT Cake find?
First, it's crucial to say the vast majority of people with mental health symptoms are not violent. That's really important context.
Absolutely.
That said, the report found at least 46% of these attackers showed mental health symptoms before the attack.
Okay, nearly half again. What kinds of symptoms?
The most common were psychotic symptoms, hallucinations, paranoia, delusions. That was seen in 30% of the attackers.
So things like hearing voices, feeling persecuted, holding very unusual fixed beliefs.
Precisely. Symptoms indicating a break from reality for some. Depression was also significant, affecting 24%. And 14% had expressed suicidal thoughts previously.
Was this rate of mental health symptoms different from past studies?
The overall percentage, 46%, was actually a bit lower than in some prior NTACR reports on other types of targeted violence. But the rate of psychotic symptoms specifically, that 30%, remained fairly consistent.
And were these individuals getting help? Did they have contact with mental health services?
Almost a third, 32%, had been diagnosed or had received some form of mental health treatment in the past.
So some connection to the system.
Some connection, yes.
Yeah.
But the report notes that the treatment varied a lot, and it wasn't always consistent or sustained. Just starting treatment isn't always enough. Ongoing, appropriate care is key. There's an example of an attacker who'd even been institutionalized for paranoia, but still committed an attack later.
That highlights the complexity. The report also looked at attackers' beliefs, maybe ideologies or fixations. What emerged there?
Yeah, about a quarter, 24%, held clear ideological or hateful beliefs. Things like anti-Semitism, white supremacy, other extremist views.
Beliefs that could potentially justify violence in their minds?
Exactly, framing their actions as part of some larger cause. And beyond specific ideologies, 19% showed intense, obsessive preoccupations, fixations.
Fixated on what?
Could be those ideologies, could be violence itself, fascination with past attackers, or sometimes former partners. This could lead to things like stalking, harassment, or writing manifestos about their grievances.
The internet often gets discussed here too. Online radicalization. Did the report touch on that?
It did. It mentioned the influence of certain online spaces, specifically Chan sites like 8chan. At least 2 attackers seemed influenced by the Christchurch Moss attacker, whose manifesto spread on those platforms. The report also noted online misogyny and the incel, or involuntary celibate ideology in a couple of cases. And this idea of the red pill, which pops up in those spaces and some far-right groups, was mentioned too. It shows how online communities can unfortunately amplify hate and connect people heading down a dangerous path.
It really sounds like a confluence of factors. What about major life stressors, financial problems, difficult home lives?
Huge factors, according to the report. An overwhelming majority, 87%, experienced significant stressors in the 5 years before the attack.
87%. What kind of stressors?
All sorts. Family problems, romantic relationship issues, social difficulties, trouble at work or school, legal problems, personal hardships like being evicted or becoming homeless.
And financial instability specifically.
Over half, 54%, had a history of financial instability, job loss, eviction, that kind of thing. Negative home life factors were also common, affecting nearly half things like unstable housing, absent parents, maybe a parent with mental health issues.
So, a lot of instability and difficulty in their backgrounds or recent lives. Was there often a specific triggering event right before the attack?
In about 27% of cases, yes. Something specific seemed to push things over the edge, like a recent eviction or losing a job. And often that trigger was directly related to the target or the location of the attack.
Like seeking revenge after being fired, maybe triggered later by something else.
Exactly. The report gives an example like that someone fired years ago, but a recent eviction seemed to be the final trigger, leading them back to that former workplace.
This leads to the question of warning signs. Did these individuals communicate threats or show concerning behaviors beforehand?
Yes, significantly so. Two-thirds of the attackers, 65%, engaged in some kind of threatening or concerning communication before the attack.
Two-thirds. What did that look like?
Well, 43% made actual direct threats, and 57% made other communications that caused concern, maybe expressing paranoid ideas, sharing violent videos or writings, making vague comments about death or violence, stuff that made people uneasy.
And beyond words, were there noticeable behavioral changes?
Yes, in 41% of cases. People around them noticed observable changes. Things like sudden increase in substance use, becoming more depressed or withdrawn, neglecting hygiene, pulling away from work or school.
What about social isolation? Was that common?
It was noted for nearly a third, 30%. And the report clarifies this is more than just being introverted. It's being significantly withdrawn, maybe described as a loner, lacking social connections.
So threats concerning talk, behavioral changes, isolation. These signs were often present. Did people notice? Did they raise concerns?
This is maybe one of the most crucial findings for prevention. Yes, in two-thirds of the cases, the attacker's behavior did cause concern to others.
People noticed. Family, friends, coworkers.
Exactly. Even casual acquaintances sometimes. And in over half of those instances where people were concerned, they actually feared for their own safety or the safety of others because of the attacker's behavior.
They feared for safety. What kinds of behaviors triggered that level of concern?
It was a whole range, expressing suicidal thoughts, domestic violence, making those threats we talked about, strange or erratic behavior, intense anger.
So people saw these things, felt fear. What did they do?
That varied. Some people did try to intervene. They talked to the person, reported their concerns to authorities or employers, sought help. But others, maybe they just avoided the person, or maybe they talked about their concerns with others, but didn't take any direct action.
That suggests a gap, doesn't it? People see something, feel worried, even scared, but maybe don't know what to do or feel unable to act effectively.
Precisely. It highlights a potential breakdown in how we, as a community, respond to these warning signs.
Which really reinforces the main takeaway from the report's conclusion, right? That these attacks are often preventable.
Absolutely. The report strongly emphasizes that these acts are rarely impulsive. They almost always have this buildup, these observable warning signs, creating opportunities to intervene.
And the key is recognizing those signs and having a way to act.
Yes, through things like multidisciplinary threat assessment programs. The report reiterates the key findings: the diverse locations, the history of prior violence, especially domestic violence, and how often these attackers worried people around them.
And the recommendations follow from that.
They do. Establishing those threat assessment teams in communities, schools, workplaces. Rigorously enforcing existing firearm laws, especially related to prohibited individuals. Improving access to crisis support, substance abuse treatment, mental health care. Recognizing that a history of crime or violence is a risk factor. And crucially, encouraging and making it easier for people to report concerning behaviors they witness.
It outlines that threat assessment model briefly too, doesn't it? Identify, assess, manage.
Right. Identify the concerning behavior, assess the level of risk that person might pose, and then manage that risk through support, intervention, and connecting them to resources. The focus is on early intervention before violence occurs.
So the big picture here isn't about a single profile, but about recognizing a pattern of warning signs across someone's life, their behavior, their communications, their stressors.
Exactly that. It's rarely just one thing. It's often a complex mix, personal struggles concerning behaviors that are visible, sometimes hateful ideologies fueling it. Mass attacks are usually the end point of a discernible pathway.
Understanding these patterns, like the ones NT Ackley laid out, seems fundamental if we want to build safer communities.
It really is. It gives us a framework for awareness.
It makes you think, though. Considering how interconnected all these factors are, mental health struggles, isolation, online influences, life stressors, what proactive steps can communities or even just individuals really take? How do we get better at fostering that early intervention and stopping that escalation towards violence? That's definitely something for all of us to reflect on after this deep dive. Thank you for walking us through this crucial report.
Thank you. It's important information to discuss.